Good morning, everyone. I think I should change it. So, good morning, madam. So, I start here. So, this is a BOF of Emacs users, and we'll be discussing about Emacs, new Emacs which survived another 35 years. So, to start off, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Abraham Raji. I am an engineering student. I use Emacs. I've been using Emacs for the past 2 years, and I'd like to, I'd like the rest of us, to rest of my people here to, introduce themselves.
Okay. My name is Gokul Das. I'm an embedded system developer working at Ottawa, Canada. Uh, I've been a free software activist and a developer since 2006. I've been using Emacs since about 2008. I changed over to Vim in between and stayed with it for about 10 years or so, and then changed back to Emacs in with Evil mode. And these days I use both Vim and Emacs, and Emacs is kind of my work center, workplace these days. Over to Ambady.
Hi everyone, my name is Ambady. I'm working as a web developer. Um, I also help companies to switch to GNU Linux. Uh, I am a free member of Free Software Community of India. It's been about 2 years I'm working with FSP.
So, to start off, the first point, I guess we'll always say why we started using Emacs and why we still keep on using Emacs. So to start with myself, when I started my college, I became more and more interested in the free software philosophy and free software movement. And that back then I was using VS Code, and I came to know about all the things that was working behind VS Code, and I didn't want to be part of that ecosystem. So I started searching for things that were an alternative that could be that is actually very close to the free software philosophy. And I went through a lot of open source sectors, free software sectors, and finally I came across Emacs and Game, and then I tried both out, and Emacs just stood out to me a little bit more because of the whole Emacs list, primarily because I like lists, and that whole thing stood out to me. I started using Emacs, and I haven't switched since then. Why I keep using Emacs is simply because of the extensibility. For 1.5 years, for about 1.5 years, I used my own configuration, and about 6 months ago, I switched to Doom Emacs. Both have been very nice. The reason I switched to Doom Emacs is because a lot of configuration is done by people who have been working in that field. So the configurations I find that they're better than my own, but at the same time it's still configurable, extensible that I can bring all my keybindings here too. So it is a bit more convenient. The best thing about Emacs is the extensibility and the freedom the user gets with their edit text editor, and or you can obviously do all these wonderful things. And that is a list of its own. And if I start talking about that, the entire viewers won't be there. So yeah, just you can do that.
Okay, then I guess I'll talk about why I switched to Emacs first. I was a programmer since school days. I was very interested in programming. I mean, I started at about fourth grade, and I continued till about my 12th grade on Windows programming in Visual Basic and C++. But I found it really weak platform for doing that. Don't get angry at me for saying that, but that was my experience. I mean, Windows was not that easy to program with. So then I switched over to Linux by the time I was in college entirely. And one of the biggest changes that I made to my workflow was to uh, go for an editor rather than an IDE. In those days, this view was very prevalent that IDs are not as powerful as editors, and obviously there were two choices: Vim and Emacs. I started using again in around 2008. I really liked Emacs, It's very consistent. It has so much extensibility. I could just modify it in a way that I wanted it to be. I mean, even today, it is exactly what I want it to be, not what someone else wants it to be for me. But eventually, I found Vim. I just tried it. I wanted to see what was so great about its key bindings, the favorite or the famous VI key bindings. I was so struck by it. I was so you know struck by Vim that I switched over to Vim from that day onwards, but not without much reluctance. I had to give up a lot on Emacs when I found VI key bindings, but VI key bindings were really, really important. I stayed with again Vim for a long time, and eventually I discovered evil keyboard bindings. So evil key bindings allow you to use the same key bindings as in Vim in Emacs, but at the same time you'll be able to use the extensibility of Emacs. And that way, I made my switch entirely to Emacs. Now I'm a Vim and Emacs user, and the reasons why I stay on Emacs is more or less the same as everybody else, and it's the same as what Abraham was just explaining. It's the extensibility. It's my command center. It's where I control my entire computer from.
Yeah.
All right, Ambady, it's up to you. Yeah.
Okay, talking about my story. Before I was introduced to the free software philosophy, I was using Sublime text editor. Um, the sleek look, and it really changed the way how people used to see an IDE. Then once I learned about the importance of free software and all, I started with Atom Editor. uh, Actually, it was going very well for a short amount of time, but soon I was not able to use it properly due to its over RAM usage. Then I started checking for other IDs with free software license, of course. And that's when I found out Emacs. Starting with Emacs in its vanilla mode, it was not that easy. It is not easy to spend a lot of the time to learn any ID when you have a lot of work to do. So I started with Spacemacs, and I was happy with it. It's been about 3 years since I switched to Spacemacs. The Helm and the default, a lot of extensions Spacemacs provides, which makes easy to work with or make it as an IDE. Then it's been about 2 months since I switched to vanilla Emacs. Even before I tried a couple of times, but it was a miserable failure. Switching to vanilla Emacs was not that easy. You have to spend some time to make it work as you want. Right when I got used to configuring Emacs, I got pinky finger syndrome. It's not a joke. It's called ulnar neuropathy. It affects your pinky finger. But once you get used to Emacs, once you love it, it's not easy to go back to any other editor. Such a wonderful, awesome text editor, gives you a lot of customizability, very extensible, and a true editor for a hacker. Hacker not in the mass media sense, the hacker as used in the hacker culture.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so now let's get to the meat of the whole discussion. So Emacs has been successful for most of the past. I mean, for the fact that the project has been active and it keeps going even after 35 years is a testament to how powerful the editor is and how great it is. So but still, nevertheless, it's not perfect. Now, I'd like for us to discuss all the things that they'd like to see happen in Emacs. So, me personally, I'd like to see. So we all know this thing that I think we all would like to see. More things that is directed towards that will help it easy. That will make it easier for new people to get into Emacs. So one thing I feel is that a lot of people, not a lot of people, I think almost everyone who comes to one of the things that everyone without a doubt does is change things or make things look prettier. Maybe but it's sometimes a better mod line, sometimes it's a better theme. So people do that. So I feel like when the first time user like installs Emacs and opens Emacs, what they see is a very outdated UI. So at that point, they might not even have thought hardly about extending it, or they might not be even aware of all the things they should do. And so I think that maybe working a bit on the user interface might be helpful for someone who might just start out. So that is my point. One thing that I'd like to do, that I'd like to see. Another thing that I think is kind of crucial to to ensure that Emacs stays on for the coming years is regarding so the user interface and things even extend to the documentation. Org has somewhat decent documentation. Before Org also used to have this very 90s website kind of website. Even Emacs, though the Emacs website is kind of appealing, it's pretty good. But when it comes to documentation, Emacs documentation on the web is still, kind of like it looks kind of outdated. But the thing is that most people would argue that you are not supposed to read the Emacs documentation on the web in your browser. You're supposed to read it Emacs. So I know that is true, but a lot of beginners might not know that. So they when most of the developer community revolves around this thing. Like it's like a norm nowadays. Like you go for documentation on the website. So when they go to the website, they see a website that is like that doesn't stay well in all devices. That doesn't have like very comfortable navigation and that sort of thing. So that kind of hinders the experience for new users. So I'd like to see that get better over the coming years. So these are two things that I'd like to say, and we can explain more in detail later on, or we can add stuff in. But like I'd like to pass on the mic to Gokul to get into.
Okay. Yeah. So, how do we get Emacs to work for another 35 years, assuming that the computers remain the same for another 35 years? Uh,
Hmm.
well, that is one big problem, but still, let's assume that it is going to be there. Let's assume that there are going to be the same programming language. Yeah, probably Python is even the Python language has been there for 30 years. It will work, I guess. So the first thing to note about Emacs is about it's all about power users. Okay,
Hmm.
so there's a limitation. You can't expect everyone to get into Emacs because it is fundamentally designed for hackers. Okay, hackers and power users. It's not a software like a Firefox or a distro which can be just picked up by someone. I mean, this is something meant for developers and developers who are willing to change the program. That is different from an IDE, normal IDE, which is supposed to work from the word go. But on the other hand, Emacs is a software that uh, it's meant to be looked into. It's meant to be hacked by people. If you really want it to work as you expect it to, you have to look at the source code and you have to be willing to change it. There's always going to be, I mean, the entire population is not going to be like that. We are going to find only a small population which is curious enough to look at source code when it is available. But what Emacs does really well is it makes it easy for you to do that. It makes it easy for you to configure it using a programming language, to look at its source code and make changes as necessary. What we really need to do is that we should attract the people, we should attract that kind of people into this field. Okay, we should be really making it more visible to the people with the aptitude for hacking. I believe that even after 35 years, you will find enough people who are who have this kind of aptitude, who are hackers like this. So I'm assuming that eventually, for next 35 years, our challenge will be to find these kind of users. How do we find them? So one of the things that we can do about that is as Abraham said, as we start with it, we are going to get a very vanilla interface for a vanilla Emacs, and it looks very dull. It's really hard to get started with it. To learn the key bindings, to modify it as you like. But the one recent trend that's going on in the Emacs community is that there are a lot of new distros coming out. One of them is Space Max. The other one is Doom. I believe that we should be concentrating more on these distros. Like, for example, in case of Linux, we don't usually say, okay, you can install Linux on your system. We usually say you can install Ubuntu on your system, or Debian on your system, or Fedora on your system. Just like that, in the future, maybe we should think about promoting Doom Emacs or Space Max or something new, depending on the theme. Maybe they can create a special distribution for web development, which will have all the correct packages installed and the correct key bindings already installed. That is one thing that we can do. So I'm hoping that we will see better and better and more number of distributions which work on vanilla Emacs. So vanilla Emacs will be like the Linux of editors, and these distributions will be like the Linux distributions that are out there. Another one change that I would really like to see is we need a better user interface, or rather key bindings, than the Emacs key bindings. Just like Ambady said, I also had this ulnar nerve problem when I started with Emacs. But I don't have any kind of problems with the evil key bindings, which I'm really familiar with. I honestly believe that the Vim key bindings are much easier to pick up than uh, Emacs key bindings, and some of the distros actually follow that as well. Uh, I believe that the Doom Emacs as well as SpaceMax both follow the same thing, the Vim key bindings instead of the vanilla Emacs key bindings. So maybe we should see more of that. And for some people, even that might be hard. Evil key bindings are really good. Emacs key bindings are also good. Both are ancient because they were used a long time ago. These days, it's very different. It's like a Kua mode that is more common, which uses Control C, Control V, and Control Z for undo, redo. Copy, undo, and redo. So maybe we should give the users a first time option to select one of these key bindings and maybe start there. It will reduce the shock of starting with Emacs that people face in the beginning. And another thing that we could see is we need meta packages maybe. What I mean by meta packages is that let's say that you want to install, or let's say that you want to configure your Emacs for web development. You may have to install a dozen packages. Okay, that can be really hard. Maybe we should find a way to combine all of them together, just one package which can install all the 12 others to and configure them appropriately. So if that happens, it will be probably easier for people to start with a theme, web development or embedded system development or anything like that. So these are my initial ideas. I'll hand this over to Ambady.
Okay, I agree with Gogol with everything he said. Emacs distro seems to be the way, you know, starting the Emacs way, using the Emacs key bindings and learning how to use the Emacs in general. You know, it's different from Vim and other IDEs which people are familiar with. It's a steep learning curve, but once you get used to it, you will feel very comfortable. You will not do any other IDE, I think. Mm. Yeah, Emacs has survived 35 years. It started in 1985 and it managed to survive 35 years. So I believe it will survive until 35, given that there will always be some hackers who are very passionate about picking their systems and hacking. You know, I believe there will be, even if it is so small percentage, I still believe Emacs will survive. Then there is this issue with developers. I don't have the statistics, but I have read in some articles that veteran developers, many developers are getting aged, and you know, new developers coming, the rate is very low. As I said before, I don't have the statistics. That's what I read. In that case, that's a problem. Mm, but if Emacs gets enough user base, I think developers will also adapt that, such as attracting them using QR mode, as Google said. People need something that works out of the box. It is not easy with the vanilla Emacs, but with the help of third-party distros, people can get started with using Emacs, just like I did it with Space Max. Yeah, distros will do a great job in attracting people to Emacs. And know what's coming in next 35 years, we can't predict. Even the form of computing may change. There will be formless computing, we don't know. The AI can get integrated into text editors as well. In case of Emacs, you can use it as IDE, but it doesn't stop there. You can. There are people who live in Emacs. Emacs is not just for text editing. You can do all stuff. You know, if you have seen the popular KCD comic, that there is a butterfly mode in Emacs, which led. Uh, yeah, yeah. As I said, there are people who literally live in Emacs. They don't need any other packages. You know, everything just works well with Emacs, whether it is email or their instant messaging application or RSS feed, whatever. Uh, whatever new software appears, it gets integrated into Emacs. You can edit files remotely using Emacs, and yeah, there are a lot of features that are unique to Emacs. There is also EXWM, Emacs Window Manager. You can replace your desktop environment with EXWM. You can even play videos, images, file management, whatever you can imagine, you can do it with Emacs.
True, true. So
Yeah.
I think now like there might be a lot of users out here who use VS Code. So maybe I think maybe we can talk about the kind of mindset you need to approach Emacs with. So uh, I think I'll start. So Emacs, I think we have mentioned in this video itself multiple times. Emacs is a hacker's editor, right? So there are this software like Firefox, this software like things that you use on that's meant not just for programmers, that's meant for general public and everyone. But Emacs isn't necessarily one of those things. It is not aiming to be one of those things either, right? It is not aiming to be Microsoft Word. It is or something like that. What it is aiming to be is for someone who wants a system that more or less makes itself that so it is that adopts itself to the user instead of so most other editors that we see like VS Code or Atom, what happens is that learn the we learn the editor and we adjust our workflows and what is available in the editor, and that's the sort of way things go. But in GNU Emacs, the the idea is basically that the editor conforms itself to our needs and to what we want, whatever kind of programmer we are. That is, I think, very powerful. The fact that if we needed the editor, we can even extend the editor beyond what it is, and that is something very powerful. And that is that's the kind of activity we need to go into Emacs. As in, this the Emacs doesn't have a lot of things already into it that you might have in something like VS Code, because that that is because Emacs wants to be that bare minimum, and they want you to have the things, or they want you to be bothered with only the things that you will ever need, and they don't want to throw stuff that you might not need into it. But again, then there's also Emacs is known for shipping a lot of things with it. For example, everything from a mail client to a web browser. But yeah, so the general idea that you should go into Emacs is about creating something of your own. Something that that is there for a long time. That it will be like building your own home. Once you do that, nothing else really feels the same because Emacs is like a very well tailored suit. You wear that, you get that comfort, you get that, you work, you get that amount of productivity. That, things like VS Code and, maybe Atom and all are like ready-made clothes. They might be good and they're also, they're good, but they will never be as good as a, very tailored, as a tailored clothes that's, made just for you. So that is what I say. Gokul?
Hello. Yeah. So let me pick up where Abraham Raji has left, and let me pick up where Ambady has left as well. So they are both talking about hacker systems. Emacs being a hacker's editor, which is very true. But that is one aspect I think can't be emphasized enough. If we are thinking about attracting more people, we have to emphasize the hacker culture there. Emacs is not a system that stands alone on its own. It's a part of an entire ecosystem where the user is expected to modify or configure systems as they like it. Okay, one of the examples is maybe Arch Linux. It's a scary thing. You have to configure your entire operating system there, but there are a lot of other projects like Suckless. There are projects like Geeks, which all expects the user to modify your own system. Uh, Unfortunately, the current state of software development or software engineering creates a split between the programmers and consumers. The programmers create the system, they configure everything, and the consumers just use it. That is how all our software is these days. Even if you are a programmer using an IDE, remember that you are just a consumer. You are using an IDE designed by someone else. Okay, but in this ecosystem, there's a huge ecosystem where you have to. You are not just a programmer. There's no split between us programmer and the consumer. The consumer programs the system by themselves. So that is a hacker system. And one of the major hacking systems that I expect will push Emacs forward is the Geeks ecosystem that is programmed using Guile scheme. The Geeks ecosystem has its entire operating system, including packages and the way to build it, defined in scheme, and its init system is written in scheme. So everything can be hacked in scheme, and Emacs is a very big part of it. So it's one entire operating system that can be controlled from Emacs if you wish. The user interface is extremely powerful. In my case, I use the GUI mode of Emacs, which is like a very powerful terminal. A terminal which can not just display text for you, it can display even graphics for you and GUI elements. And we haven't even touched the power level that we can achieve using the user interface. One of the examples is org mode. The org mode is a simple language which you can learn, but the number of things that you can do with org mode is like so many. You can control your entire life with it. You can manage your entire life with it. You can note down things. You can create bookmarks. You can create a to-do list. You can create a contacts list. Everything can be done from one single interface. So that is just an example of what Emacs is capable of. Okay, similar power is shown by Emacs Geeks, which is the user interface for controlling the Geeks operating system from inside Emacs. There are a lot of uses. There are a lot of uses for the user interface, and we need ways to integrate it into Emacs. It's quite easy because the ELISP is quite easy, and we need to expose people to this. One of the reasons why Emacs has picked up a lot recently is because of plugins like Magit. Magit is front end for, it's the best front end for Git. Okay. If you know how to use Git from the command line, you will find Magit to be the best alternative that is available for it. You have other options like, again, org mode. You have even more options like the LaTeX interface. We need to bring more into it. So one of the biggest focus areas should be for, again, as Abraham Raji said, web developers. I see that VS Code has an advantage there, but in terms of web development, but in terms of Emacs, there is an untapped potential. We can do a lot. We can even display web pages inside. Uh, we can even have live previews inside Emacs, but then that is not there yet. That would be one big area where we can bring people into Emacs. Another good area would be uh, embedded system development, for me at least. I use Emacs for embedded system development, but there are still tools that we can integrate. One of the best examples is the Platform IO tool, which is by far the best embedded system development tool that I have seen so far. But it is not yet integrated into Emacs. That is a shame, because I feel that they will go well together. That is one area that you can bring more people in. Another area is data processing and data analysis. Uh, it is there. We can see Jupyter notebooks from inside, but there is still, like I said, the user interface is extremely powerful. We still haven't made use of it. So these are the few areas where I think we can attract more and more people. Don't expect Emacs to attract everyone from around. Not everyone is curious, but you will find enough people in every area where they can use Emacs, where they can take advantage of the Emacs potential. So hopefully, next 35 years, we will see the momentum picking up. And over to you, buddy.
Okay, I think one cannot miss to talk about org mode when talking about Emacs. I have heard that many people has uh, started to try Emacs just because of this org mode. Even if it is just managed using plain text files, as far as I know, I don't know if any other interfaces to work with org mode. Yeah, it has an Android interface, but on desktop, I don't know if there is anything that can compete with Emacs for using org mode. It's a wonderful package. Even if I haven't started to use it properly, the features of note taking and agenda management org modes is awesome. And I think yes, it can still attract people to Emacs. And yeah, like Abraham Raji said, UI is also an issue. Emacs has a very ancient UI, but distros like Doom Emacs and SpaceMax do well with custom themes and all. The dark theme, which many people prefer. Yeah, talking about Emacs, even productivity is what you should be looking for. UI is also an issue. And then comes with the usage of mouse. Emacs is, fully keyboard oriented. One doesn't need any mouse to work with Emacs. Yeah, but unlike Vim, people use mouse or touchpad relatively more in Emacs compared to Vim. But still, other than for navigation, and we don't use mouse much. But if you take an VS Code user, especially if it is a newbie, they even the Git merge request and Git pull, everything they work with mouse. I think VS Code supports that feature, and the UI is also pretty good compared to Emacs. People coming to Emacs seeing this UI, and it's not just about look and feel. The user experience also. There is no tabs by default, and it's just a plain text area you see. Even the terminology is completely different. What you call window in Emacs is not the window in standard text editors. It is called frame in Emacs, and copy paste everything has Emacs and on terminology can also be confusing to newcomers. Mm, Then
Do you believe that you think that all the old terminology is holding back people? We should be bringing them together forward into the new world. Instead of calling it a frame, we should probably call it. I mean, instead of calling it a window, we should probably call it a frame or something like that. Do
yeah,
you think that that is going to help it?
uh, it can be even if it's a small issue. It's worth looking at. Yanking. Even in Vim and Emacs, yanking means different things, right? So people,
You're absolutely right. I mean, it's first time you see yanking. What the hell is yank mean? I mean, does it mean copy or paste?
yeah,
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. But after using Vim and Emacs for about 10 or 12 years, I tend to say yank and kill instead of copy and paste. These days. Sometimes I have problem communicating with other people.
yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, that is one thing that we should be doing, right? We should be changing the terminology. We should probably be changing the terminology to modern terms, right?
Probably.
Yeah,
But what
Earlier,
about
we came
it
from
can be a step. If
1980.
the key bindings? They actually match the old terms. Like for example, yank, kill.
Control
Uh,
Y.
yes, Control Y and Control K and all are there. So we'll probably have to change that as well.
of course, people learning a new binding is not gonna be easy for a newcomer. So yeah, QO mode may be helpful, but one thing, one issue is that once people get convenient with the already existing key bindings, I doubt whether they will switch to the Emacs way. Uh, but still, I think having the usual key bindings available in other text editors, making it available in Emacs will also help for
One
newcomers.
one aspect of this whole thing is that, suppose we decide, let's, modernize the whole thing, let's maybe change the key binding and also change the way we, call things in email. But then there is an entire group of people who have been used to all these old things and like these old things at this point. So we are just disappointing
Okay,
them.
no, may I interrupt? Oh, no. I'm not talking about changing the default key bindings in the official
No,
Emacs.
I was just suggesting that what if we do this, like, this might happen.
Uh, I don't think the veteran Emacs users will agree with changing key bindings. I was talking about offering an extra option to newcomers, whether it's through a third-party distro or something that user can change easily, not spending much time on it.
Yeah, regarding that, is it okay to answer the question that the people are asking on the pad right now?
Yeah, sure,
Because
sure.
there's one question directly related to that. Somebody is asking if there will be an easy option to set parameters or rather configuration for Emacs like it does in VS Code, right?
Okay. Like
So
you
that's an
doing
interesting question. Yeah, that is probably it, right? VS Code in VS Code it is written in JavaScript. The configuration is written in JavaScript, but most of the configuration happens from the GUI, right?
yeah.
So is something like that possible with Emacs?
So, that is a very good question. So, um, so there is a configuration. Configuration is for the basic features, like, there's stuff like changing the font size or changing the kind of font that you use. So for simple stuff, basic text editor stuff, there is a GUI, way to do things. But if you really want to get to the, like the real stuff of Emacs, you really need to start writing configuration in your config.
But what I find when I started with Emacs is that Emacs has a theme option which can be configured from the GUI. Okay, and
Yeah.
as I told you, the GUI features of Emacs is something that has not been fully exploited yet. The Gmax GUI is extremely powerful, and the theme shows. I mean, theming options show that you can actually use the GUI. Probably more options should be exposed through the GUI. It shouldn't be too hard. it should be able to, we should be able to do that on a buffer. Should be able to click buttons or check selection boxes, and then it should automatically reflect in the files, backend files. That I think is definitely possible, and that will probably make it easier for people to start with Emacs.
Yep. So, yeah, so Brady,
Yeah.
Yes, Abraham.
yeah, would you like to add your points to this question?
Actually, I don't know such an option to easily configure Emacs. There is a customized command, but still, I don't think it's as easy as in VS Code.
Yeah, it is
So,
not as easy, but don't you think that it should be as easy as in VS Code? It's not practically difficult. It should be possible, right?
yeah, I mean, yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I think
So there's
this
this.
could be also based on that. Can someone talk about the competition from VS Code? So, uh, I think so. One thing is worth noting is once someone really starts using Emacs, there is no way they can go back to VS Code. I mean, would within three of us, would anybody think about going back to VS Code as their main editor at this point? I mean, I personally wouldn't. I actually tried VS Code this new this couple of weeks ago. I mean, after New Year's, and I didn't see the point. I mean, I used it like I used it for JavaScript development. As in, like, I was using it to like do TypeScript and stuff, and that was and this is what like VS Code was like that's a killer feature. Like VS Code is said to be very great for JavaScript, and I really didn't feel like I was missing out on anything with Emacs because for one, Emacs uses the sort of that engine from VS Code for their LSP mode, so that is one thing anyway. But other than that, there is child mode and all those things are there for Emacs. So the auto completion and intelligent completion, that sort of thing I get it in Emacs anyway. So I don't necessarily, I don't necessarily see a point in going back to Emacs. And I think that is where the challenge is. Getting a user to try out Emacs and really give it a chance. Because once a user gives it a proper chance and starts to use it and feels, the Emacs for what it is, then I don't think they can go back to VS Code. And I don't, in that sense, Emacs doesn't have a competition in that sense. There is no text editor like Emacs in that sense. So I don't think VS Code and Emacs are competing in the same place here because for people who want Emacs, there is nothing that can substitute. There is no text editor out there that I can make presentations with. There is no text editor out there that I can do, like that has like native support for blogging and stuff. There's no text editor for me to, if I want, I can send mail with. So there is no substitute for Emacs for me. And so VS Code doesn't even, like, isn't even an option at that. So yeah, I'd like
Yeah.
to, others please fill in.
Yeah. So Abraham, so it's an editor that you allow once you get to use it once, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, related to that, there's one more question. It's related to what just Abraham just said. It's about completion. So how does the completion in Emacs look like? Is it good enough? So can Ambady say something about that? That's a question that somebody asked on this is IRC.
Okay, I use company mode for completion in Emacs, but I found it to be, you know, lacking a little bit of power. Once,
LSP mode or not? Please
yeah,
mention that.
I was talking about company mode without LSP, but with LSP, company mode is good enough. I'm happy with it. That's one thing, talking about LSP, that's one thing one good thing that Microsoft did. LSP is an open protocol. You can integrate it with Emacs or any other text editor that supports LSP. So with LSP with company mode works well for completion in Emacs, and completion other than for text editing, like in for commands and all, there is IV. I used Helm in Space Max, but when I switched to an Emacs, I tried IV and it also works well. It's You get completion everywhere, not just in the edit area. And
That is absolutely true. I get completion everywhere too. I mean, on the lower buffer as well as inside, it's not any less compared to VS Code, especially when you have LSPs in it.
Is there another question I have from the IRC something? Because I can't see the IRC chat.
Well, I don't see another questions from the IRC yet.
Yes, yes, yes. So I guess we are up nearing our time. I guess it's over. Yeah,
uh,
are we on extra time now? It's 1:45. Okay, so I guess we'll just wind this thing up. So thanks, Brady and Gokul, for joining. Viewers, thanks to the organizers of the
it's
MiniDebConf
my
for being
pleasure.
here. So
yeah,
thank you
thanks.
for joining us. Thank you.